I'm Daren Redfearn. I'm going to talk about agronomic management practices of small grains for silages. When we talk about small grains for use as forages, there are 5 key factors that make these of interest for most producers for use. The first reason is that they can be pretty easy to establish. They can also grow very rapidly. Thirdly, they should be very productive. Fourth, they have the potential for high forage quality. And lastly, they can be economical. Some of the things that we know or think we know about small grains for forage is that they can have a variable production. Oftentimes what we'll see are more differences within varieties of a single species than we see across species. As I mentioned earlier, they can also have very high forage quality. Planting date is probably the most critical factor that we see for growing small grains for forages. If we look at a date before October 1st, that's the planting date that we can expect fall growth for forages. Planting dates after October 1st, we don't really expect any fall growth, but we do have expectations that we can have significant amount of spring growth. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we do need to be aware of the fall planting date effects on small grain forages. For instance, the later that you plant into the fall, even though we would expect reduced fall production, we do see carryover effects into the spring from later planting dates. So what we do not know, or what we think we don't know, is how these mixtures of small grain forages work together. As an example, a binary mixture, which would be a combination of 2 different cultivars within a species, or 2 different species, such as mixing a winter type with a spring type. Examples of that would be cereal rye in combination with oat is one that we commonly see. We can mix cereal rye with spring triticale. When we look at something that's a little more complicated than that, although we would call those simple mixtures, which is a blend of 4 or 5 different types. And then there is some interest gaining in looking at complex mixtures, which is a combination of 8 or 10 different types of forages. While there are many producers that have had some success with this, we don't really have a good science base of what we might expect when we look at some of these mixtures. The other thing that we don't know, but we're starting to understand a little bit, is basically how we manage much of these small grains to optimize their spring forage production. And again, I think a lot of that's going to be related back to that planting date, whether or not it's an early planting date or a later planting date. When we think about some of the take-home messages, one of the things that's important to remember is that the small grain forages are all lumped together under a single umbrella. They're managed very similarly from seeding rates to fertilization rates to timing of planting. But it's also important to know that even though there are similarities, there are distinct differences. Most of the differences are related in maturity, which does have some impact on how we'll manage those both during the fall and manage them during the spring as well. It's also important to note that what may work in one region of the country or one region of the state is likely not going to work quite as well in another region. So even though the concepts may be the same, there may be some small differences that need to be adjusted based on the region. And then finally, I think when we think about the cost of production per acre for many of these small grain forages, at least on a per acre basis, they can be quite expensive. However, it is important to think a little bit beyond cost per acre and think about how we're going to manage these to maximize or optimize the forage production. That optimization up to maximization of forage production is going to further reduce that cost of forage production per acre.